I've been talking for 30 years and writing for 30 years. There are very few people control the world. Very few people. People will be staggered how few.
The issue of freedom of expression has become increasingly contentious, particularly with the rise of digital platforms and social media.
Come across many stories like this. In fact, to such an extent that Facebook has had to say, actually, we're not doing it on purpose, or it's just for advertising.
Ikey has faced deplatforming and censorship on various online platforms, which he views as a dangerous encroachment on free speech.
No, I mean, that might be hard for people to believe, but it's true. It never crosses my mind. And for this reason, A, we're more powerful when we take our power back than ever we believe we are. And, you know, I look on these people as pathetic little boys in short trousers, little boys and girls in short trousers, because what kind of psychopathic insanity does it take to want to impose your will over a vast population of people? I mean, it's pathetic. They are pathetic. I'm going to be frightened of them. Are you having a laugh? No way. And the other point is this. Once you start self-identifying with being consciousness, that's my eternal state, your eternal state, everyone's eternal state, consciousness, a state of awareness. Well, whether it's in this body, it'll be out of this body eventually anyway at some point. Whether it's in this body or not in this body is almost irrelevant, because it's always a state of consciousness having an experience of some kind. So the worst that can happen to me is that I leave this body, right? And I will eventually anyway. I'm going to stay here forever. It never crosses my mind. If you're taken out, you're taken out. But you're taken out trying to do the right thing. Courage is overcoming fear, which is a really powerful thing, courage overcoming fear. When you let go of fear, you don't need courage, you just do it. It's not like, you know, if I say, I've just written a book, I've just finished it. It's going to be probably the most controversial book, certainly given current times, probably going to be one of the most controversial books ever written. And so I know what's coming with it, but I don't fear it.
You're used to it?
I don't fear it because I'm putting out what I believe to be right, and I don't need courage to put it out, because I don't fear putting it out, because I don't fear the reaction. The reaction is what it is.
So you react to it?
A lot of people are going to read it and go, thank God someone's saying it at last. And the system's going to say, ban him, condemn him. The force that these Satanists in the global cult worship in their rituals. And it's a non-human force. I mean, as you say, I looked and met so many people around the world in different cultures and looked at what the cultures say and what the legends say, what the accounts say. And again, you're seeing a non-human force being described as a manipulator of human society. And it seems to take a reptilian form, not only a reptilian form, but that seems to be the dominant force, the one that's really calling the shots. But then you can go deeper and you can say, well, it doesn't matter whether we're looking at something that's human or something that's not human, that's reptilian, that's one of these grays. It doesn't matter in the foundation of it all, because how that form, if you like, behaves is dictated by its perception. So what we're looking at the bottom of this rabbit hole is a state of perception. And you mentioned it earlier. I've been talking about a mind virus for decades, a mind virus that's manipulating human perception and directing human psychology. And then much more recently, I came across the concept in the Native American arena in terms of the description of a mind virus, which they call Wetiko, at least the Cree tribal group do. And I read about Wetiko and I thought, this is exactly the mind virus I've been writing about. And it's a state of consciousness that's incredibly distorted and inverted. That's why it inverts everything. If you look at the the Satanists, they invert all their symbols. Their symbols are the inverted pentagram, the inverted cross. Everything is upside down. And if you look at the word evil, it's the word live written backwards. And that's very appropriate because this Wetiko consciousness, which drives these reptilians and drives this global cult, it's a inversion of love. In fact, my definition of evil is the absence of love. Love is that which connects us to outside this madhouse, which I say is a simulation, actually, to that which drives the vast, overwhelming majority of infinite consciousness, infinite possibility, and that's love. And what's happened is that humans have been manipulated into a fake reality, a simulation, think Matrix, that has sought to disconnect us, to separate us from that enormity of love. And what is love? Love is all that is, has been, and ever can be. Love is all possibility. Love is all potential. Love is that which says, I will always do what I know to be right, and I will not think about consequences, because to think consequences will be to consider not doing what I know to be right. I'm doing what I know to be right because I'm coming from love. Love, through this heart vortex, is how we connect with the great beyond, outside of this mind prison, which is what it is. This simulation this matrix is a mind prison, a perception prison. And the whole idea is to stop us making that connection, to keep us separated. And in simple terms, or not even simple terms, very accurate terms, I would suggest, to hold our point of attention and our source of perception in the five senses and the immediate subconscious around the five senses. That's where they want to isolate us. It all comes down in the end, in terms of these society controlling institutions, to what I call the global cult, which is a global network of secret societies and semi-secret groups with ultimately, if you go deep enough in the rabbit hole, a mission control, a central organizational center. This explains why countries tend to respond to the same kind of situations in extraordinarily the same way. The thing is, if you're talking about control and the need to control, then you look at society as it's structured, and control is overwhelmingly dictated by money. Who has it and who doesn't? And if you look at a definition of freedom, well, it's choice. The more choices you can make, the freer you are. The fewer choices you can make, the less free you are. And in the way that society is structured today, what dictates choice more than anything than money? Who has it and who doesn't? So I hear people talk about how the billionaires and the billionaire corporations, etc., are all about money. But, well, yes, on one level, they have a mentality that is as an insatiable greed. But the bottom line of bottom lines is not about accumulation of money. It's accumulation of control via the weapon of money. And when you look at how this cult, in all its different expressions, brought in the money system to what it is today, it's founded on creating money out of nothing called credit and charging interest on it.
the focus of attention on the here today, gone tomorrow politicians is diverting attention to where the real power is. It's not about, I mean, Trump, it's Trump now. And I love Trump. I hate Trump. He replaced Obama. Someone will replace Trump. And they come and they go. The permanent government doesn't go. At the top of the pyramid, you've got this network of people, very few people. Compared with the global population, it's laughable. Then you've got the secret society network through which it manipulates, but keeping secret that this cabal exists. Under that, you've got control of finance. And note, every one thing I'm mentioning doesn't come and go. It's always there. So you come through finance. And what does finance do? It dictates choice. If you say to people, what would you like to do with your life? And they say this, and I say, why aren't you doing it? They say, I ain't got the money, mate. So you control choice for the population by controlling the money. Then you come down and you hit the military. The military's always there. When you travel around America, I'm sure you've seen it too, Eamon. There's forts everywhere. I mean, the amount of land that's occupied by the American military is staggering. And of course, it's got a budget. I think it's up to 10 countries, the 10 next countries with the biggest military budgets, before you equal the military budget of the United States. So it's fantastically funded. Along with the military, you've got the military intelligence networks and the domestic intelligence network, the CIA and British intelligence, the National Security Agency, etc. These are always there. And then you come down, you hit the corporations, you hit the justice and legal system, that's always there. And if you're going to control a society, you control the money, but you must also control the law. And then you come down after this hierarchy of permanence, and then you hit the here today, gone tomorrow politicians, where the focus of attention is always on, as if they're making the decisions.
Okay.
You know, they have a saying in America, people who are awake anyway, it doesn't matter who you vote for, the government still gets in. Yeah, the permanent government still gets in.
People said to me, didn't you know that would happen if you said this and said that? And I said, well, do you know I'd work that out? Mm-hmm. But you say it anyway. But you see, there's a lot of background with that, because I was going through my life. I left school at 15. I didn't take a major exam, because I went to be a professional footballer with Coventry and others. And then my career ended with rheumatoid arthritis. I played a whole year of league football with rheumatoid arthritis. That's a whole story in itself. But what that did is it developed in you, because all these things are within us, and experience brings them out. And if you don't have experience, often they don't come out. So I have this phrase, life tends to give us our greatest gifts brilliantly disguised as our worst nightmares. Mm. Because often our worst nightmare will bring things out of us that wouldn't otherwise happen. This is why if you bring your kids up and you protect them from everything, you're doing them no favors, because you're not developing strong people who will be able to deal with life. You're developing people who are always looking to be protected, and look at what we have now. And once you have a generation or you have a population that wants to be protected and perceives itself all the time as being a victim, where does the point of power move? It moves to authority, because people look to authority to protect them from what they fear or what they feel victimized by. So what we've been developing is a population of emotionally weak people who perceive themselves in terms of victims. When you have challenges in life and you meet them, it brings something out of you. I've been writing in my books now for nearly 30 years that there is a plan to make Orwell's 1984 reality. We're seeing this, of course, with more and more control of people's privacy and the constant gathering of fine detailed data of people's lives. But the key thing is this: what directs people's lives? What directs their opinions? What directs their behavior? Their perceptions.
their perceptions of themselves, their perceptions of the world, their perceptions of world events.
The way they're sold those events.
Yeah, now, this is the point. Where do we get those perceptions from? We get them from information received. It might be a personal experience information, or it might be the 10 o'clock news, or it might be the Daily Mail, or something on Facebook. The point is, if you control the information that people receive, then you will, to a vast extent, dictate their perceptions, especially if you also censor, suppress, and marginalize other people giving another fix, another version of the same event or the same situation. Now, I've just come back literally a few days ago from America. I've been filming there, and particularly Silicon Valley. I call it the Devil's Playground. If you now look at that, what is, when you visit it, a very small area of America, never mind the world, you've got companies that Facebook, Google, etc., that are increasingly dominating the gathering of data of people's lives, B, because of the way they have so impacted upon the channels of communication, they dictate to such an increasing extent what people see and what people don't see. And what I can't understand, and I've experienced it many times, is over this 31, 32 years I've been doing this, I've seen people come in and they realize something's going on, and then they disappear. And some other people come up and they're flavor of the month for a short time, and then they disappear. And I look at it and I think, how can you walk away? If you claim to know where this is going, how can you walk away and leave people to their fate? I can't do that. I'm driven by wanting to break the stranglehold that this force has on human perception. And I'm driven by wanting to know the truth. I don't want a statue. I don't want a round of applause. And if from the other side comes abuse and ridicule, that is all irrelevant to me. I want to know the truth, and I shall pursue it no matter what the consequences, because I don't even think about consequences. What is freedom of speech? It's the freedom to speak. So I read a politician today saying, I agree with freedom of speech, but there are limits. Well, there's no freedom of speech then. Freedom of speech is the freedom to speak. If anyone's not allowed to speak, then it's not freedom of speech, it's freedom to conform to certain parameters of what are acceptable. And then what that's doing is giving power to some authority to decide what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And as we see, and we're seeing it massively now, once you give that power to an authority, it then starts interpreting what can and cannot be said in a way that squeezes and squeezes and squeezes more and more of what cannot be said. This is what political correctness is about. What is political correctness? It's simply manipulating the target population to silence itself, so those in authority don't have to. It's ridiculous. Now, people say, well, you say that people can say anything. Well, yes, I do, and I'll tell you why. There are laws against incitement to racism, incitement to hatred, incitement to violence. There are laws against that.
Are they laws you agree with?
Yeah, and if people use their freedom of speech to incite those things, then there are laws to deal with that, and those laws should deal with it. What I'm saying is, once you start censoring freedom of speech at the point of delivery, or even more sinister, before the point of delivery, by banning people from the right to have access to the communication networks or speak in public, that is what the fascists do. What did fascists do in Nazi Germany? What does any tyranny do? It wants to silence those that are exposing the tyranny and have a different version of events to the tyranny. So what did the Nazis do? They burnt the books. They banned the meetings of people who were exposing the Nazis. And now in this inverted world, we have people who call themselves progressives, and they seem to have this extraordinary self-delusion that progressive mentality has something to do with being liberal, when it's not. It's the opposite of liberal. They are the ones that claim to be wanting people to be inclusive and to have diversity.
But maybe on their terms.
When they're destroying diversity, and they have become the new tyranny. They have become the new Nazis. The data that's collected, and increasingly the nature of the AI that's running things, concentrates that power in such a small area, in such a small number of hands. And if you want to have control by the few of the vast number, you have to centralize power, and that's what is happening in Silicon Valley on a scale that beggars belief. Anything's possible when you have algorithms that can filter out information that's not good for the agenda you have or the outcome you want, and emphasize information that does support the outcome that you want. And increasingly it's coming to light that this is what's happening. See, when the internet started, and which came out of an organization called DARPA, by the way, which is the technological development arm of the Pentagon, it was sold as the free flow of information. You could post all kinds of opinions. Now, if that didn't start like that, and right from the start is you can't say that, you can't do that, then it wouldn't have got this massive control and influence on the communications that go on between people. So you start with what people want. And then, especially more recently, and faster, you start doing, especially when you enter the realm of semi-monopoly, you start taking away the freedom of the free flow of information. So people now are having YouTube channels just deleted. No explanation, just deleted. On a big scale when they're challenging the official narrative. Facebook censor people. They have a thing called ghost banning, where you actually get to post it, but the AI makes sure it doesn't go anywhere. And when you have the power to do that, coming back to perception, you have the power to control the information that people receive, and thus massively influence the perceptions that they have. And from their perceptions comes their behavior, comes what they will accept, what they won't accept, what they'll challenge, what they won't challenge. It's an extraordinary centralization of power. And, you know, people are saying, I love Trump, I hate Trump, and oh, it's the right, it's the left. And this vaudeville show, which it is in so many ways, is so focusing people's attention on that. It's everywhere, isn't it? Trump's everything. And people are not looking what's happening in that area of real estate in California where all this is going on. It's not just political correctness. You can't say this, you can't say that, you must say that. It's also the fact that humanity has been hoaxed on a monumental scale in relation to freedom of expression and freedom of information. And it's been done out of an area that I call the devil's playground. It's better known as Silicon Valley. What's happened is when you do the research, intelligence organizations like the CIA in the United States, the National Security Agency, and the Pentagon through an organization called DARPA, the technological development arm of the Pentagon, they began seed funding technology and companies to develop what has become now known as the internet, and an outgrowth of that, what became known as social media, and the search engine technology, which eventually became known as Google, all those were seed funded by this military intelligence network. And when they were selling it, because you can't show something's real face at the start, otherwise people will reject it and it won't get anywhere. You have to put another face to the world. So it was Google. Oh yeah, Google, yeah. And we just go to search engine, we can find what we like. That's great, hey. And social media. Oh, you post to your friends, you can say what you like. There's no censorship. Isn't it great? And then it builds, and then it builds, and then it builds. And now you've reached a point now with Facebook where it claims 2.2 billion active users in a global population of 7.5 billion. You have this 90% monopoly on search engines, searches of Google. You have YouTube, which has got basically a monopoly on the posting of internet videos, which is owned by Google. And once this monopolistic situation was reached, then they started saying, okay, now we've got this much control, we're going to start deciding what you see and what you don't see. What is called the progressive left, attacking Trump and saying, it's terrible what's happened. I say to them, look in the mirror. Because the reason that someone like Trump could come to power, the reason that these parties are coming to power in Europe, is because so many people have been left voiceless for so long. For instance, if you have what is called political correctness, and we were talking earlier about censorship and what you can hear and what you can say, political correctness is simply manipulating the population to silence itself. And more we're seeing the Orwellian destruction of free opinion and the free flow of debate on the basis of you can't say that. A few people can't control the world. There's too many people. It's not possible. Well, now we have a handful of people, which you could probably get on 10 fingers, or 2 hands, yeah, that control Google, control YouTube, owned by Google, control Facebook, that absolutely dominate the information that most people see or don't see. We have a concentration of power in Silicon Valley, a very small area of the world, that is the greatest concentration of surveillance and censorship power the world has ever seen. They can decide what you see and what you don't see, and they can trawl your data. In other words, the military intelligence community can, to find out the fine detail of your life from the information that you've posted on these various platforms. So that's what we're facing in terms of freedom of speech. It's disappearing. In fact, it doesn't exist. There is no freedom of speech. By the definition of freedom of speech is the freedom to speak your opinion and not have it censored and not have it banned. When you talk, as I'm sure you do, to the general population, you find that their views of these issues are not the same as the mob. But the mob have got very organized, the Twitter stormers. And unfortunately, because so many people, particularly celebrities, are frightened of upsetting people, frightened of losing or tainting their image as they perceive it. In other words, frightened of what other people think. Again and again you see it. They're down on their knees, they're calling for the sackcloth and the ashes. I'm ever so sorry, please forgive me. And if we go on doing this, if we go on like Scarlett Johansson did, I can understand it, but to pull out, if we keep doing that, then we're handing over power over our lives and our society to the mob, the people that intimidate people into their version of everything. And this is where we are now increasingly. The only right in the eyes of these people is I am right. And because I am right, anyone else that has a different opinion to me must by definition be wrong. And if they're wrong, then their right to freedom of speech is nothing like as important as mine, because it don't matter if they have freedom of speech because they're wrong. This is the process of thinking, or what passes for it, that is increasingly having these vociferous, loud, intimidating people impose their will on everyone else. For instance, if people have a view that you can decide your gender by just deciding it, that is an opinion, and it's opinion that the people have the right to have. But if you say, actually, I'm a man and I don't have breasts, right? And I have dangly bits, women don't. So therefore there is something in this genetic relationship to sexuality, then that's an equally valid opinion that should be open to free debate. This is the way the mob works, however. You can say, well, yes, you just decide your gender. Fair enough, it's your opinion. You should have it. But the other opinion's not allowed. By the way, this term, conspiracy theorist, conspiracy theory, which is now used as a term of debunking. Oh, he's a conspiracy theorist. What's the conspiracy? What's the dictionary definition? It's two or more people conspiring to bring about an outcome. We're drowning in them on that basis. The question is, though, where did the widespread use of conspiracy theory and conspiracy theories come from?
Where?
It came from the CIA. Provable fact. During the 1960s, when people staggeringly, why would they, were questioning the fact that a magic bullet had gone through several people in Kennedy's car and ended up in him, were questioning the fact that his head went back as seen on the Zapruder film taken by an onlooker, and they blame a guy who's supposed to be behind him. Do they have bullets that do U-turns, do they? So people were questioning that increasingly. And the CIA put out a document, you can still, I published it in one of my books, to the major media in America, giving a list of things to use to discredit those that were questioning the Kennedy assassination. Of course, later Martin Luther King and the others of the 60s. And among them was, use the term conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorist, because what does that do? It gives the idea that it's only theory. Now, do conspiracy theories exist? Of course, because you say, well, looking at the evidence, I think this is probably what happened. That's a theory. But if people read my books, a couple of them, one of them's 1,000 pages, one of them's not much smaller, you see enormous amounts of interconnecting evidence, not least from insiders and whistleblowers and what have you. Because once you do what I do, people are attracted to you to get the information out. You see, it's not a theory. It's backed up by substantial fact, but you can destroy all of that in one word. If you have people around you who so disrespect your right to be you that they give you a hard time for being you, then what are you doing with them? There's loads of other people out there that will respect you. Go and find them. Don't surround yourself with people that don't respect your right to be you. I don't care if they're family, I don't care who they are. If they don't respect your right to be you, then what are you doing interacting with them all the time? It's just going to make you depressed, it's going to make you frustrated. Walk away. And if they then come round, great. But if they don't, well, equally great. It's like kids. I see this thing with parents. I've spoken to people in their 60s who are still feeling guilty for not doing with their lives what their parents wanted them to do. I wanted to go walking in India, but my mother wanted me to be a lawyer. I don't like the law, but I had to do it. Oh no, you didn't have to do it. If your mother wants to be a lawyer, she could go and be a bloody lawyer. If you want to walk in India, go and walk in India. And if your mother, I don't care, all these stuff. Oh, but I don't care. You will only express your true, unique self if you refuse to let anyone impact and suppress that expression of your true, unique self. Look at a human life. You come out of the womb and you're immediately influenced in your perceptions by your parents who've been through the process you're about to go through. Very soon, ludicrously soon, after entering this world, you find yourself sitting at a desk with an authority figure now telling you what is, what isn't, what's right, what's wrong, what's credible, what's not credible, when you can go to the toilet, when you can eat, when you can talk. And this goes on through your formative years, where the system's version of everything, what I call the postage stamp consensus, because it's so narrow, is downloaded into people. Because when you look at a human life, it is a download of the official version of everything. That's what it is. This is why vast numbers of people have no other filter for their view of reality, self, world events than the information they receive from the mainstream media and mainstream everything. You know, you come out of the womb and your parents who've been through the process that you're about to go through, the programming process, they start influencing your perceptions of reality. Overwhelmingly, the vast overwhelming majority, not because they're being malevolent, but that they've been persuaded that their version of everything is true. Therefore, they're passing on to you because they think they're doing the best for you. You then go into what's called the education system. It's a perceptual programming operation. It's psychological warfare on the young. And from the age of 3, 4, right up through your formative years into your teenage years, day after day after day after day, you are being given the official version of everything. Official version of science, of medicine, of politics, of everything, all the way through your formative years. And it's what I call the postage stamp consensus. It's a very narrow band of possibility. And if you're going to pass exams, you have to tell the system that postage stamp perception of possibility that you've been told is reality. Otherwise, you're not going to pass your exams. Because what are exams? It's the system saying, you tell me what I've told you, and I'll give you a prize. You tell me what I've not told you, because you've got a mind of your own and you're questioning it, and I'll ring your mum and dad and say you're a disruptive influence in the classroom. Right? And we'll see what Ritalin will do to that, right? This happens all over the world. And then, having downloaded this program of perception of normal, the postage stamp reality, you then go out into the institutions. You become a journalist, a doctor, a scientist, someone in the corporate world, a politician. And you've taken with you this core download of the perception of normal and how things are. And so these institutions are all controlled by this perception, and then they confirm to each other that this perception's true. If you're a scientist and you don't stick to the scientific orthodoxy, then you lose your grants and you become ridiculed by your profession. If you're a doctor and you don't go along with the orthodoxy, you lose the right to practice, even though it might be very effective what you're doing. If you're a journalist, you won't last long if you go against the orthodoxy. And then all underpinning this, you've got peer pressure. All the people who've been through the sausage machine that you've been through, who have decided that they will accept that version of normal, they then police everyone else that wants to question that normal. So you're ridiculed or condemned by your peers if you question what they have accepted without question. Up to this point, human perception, which otherwise human control by controlling human perception, has been done by controlling information that people receive. The AI endgame, which they're openly talking about in Silicon Valley, people like the Google executive Ray Kurzweil openly, this is why so many people recently have come out and said, hold on, where are we going? About connecting the human brain or the human body thinking processes, the human mind, to AI. And what Kurzweil says is that after this connection, which he's talking about 2030, that's what he's given. I'm talking in 2018, that once the connection's made, the AI will do more and more and more of human thinking until human thinking and that human consciousness, as we would conceive it, is in his words, negligible. Now, if you are controlling AI, you are turning people into basically a computer terminal on the AI internet, because this is the idea, is to download. I mean, this sounds fantastic, but this is actually where it's going, and that's what that guy's talking about. Downloading human consciousness onto a digital form. So humans become digital rather than biological. I mean, you couldn't think of something more far out, except that that's what's happening, and that in the way that he wrote is what Aldous Huxley was talking about in Brave New World, the time when there were no longer humans, not even human procreation, not even male or female, but a very different type of human, and this explosion of transgender, which is fusing the perception of sexuality, that is taking us down the totalitarian tiptoe to this world that I'm talking about.
Because this is not a solid world. This is an energetic world, a holographic world that's malleable. You can change it, and this cult knows that our perceptions become our experience reality. This is the big truth. Why do they call them secret societies? Because they're keeping secrets, and they keep these secrets at the deepest levels. So they know that if they can, through control of information, control of the education system, control of the media and so on, if they can program your perception, they can dictate your experience, because they know that whatever your perception is will create your experience. And the reason they don't want us to know that, obviously, is because that gives us the power back. Change my perception, change my life. What they want you to think is we're living in a random, solid, physical world in which everything is just happening by accident, when actually it's being created by the perceptions of the population. They know that. We control perception, we control the world.
You can only loot a population so much until they realize there's nothing left, and they're going to start asking questions. Where's my money? What happened to all the Social Security money? And when it comes for the internet or the financial system, they're going to make the enemy privacy. They're going to make the enemy privacy 100%.
Whitney Webb recently shared her take on Wall Street, stating that her policy is to remain skeptical of Wall Street giants.
Well, my policy tends to be don't trust Wall Street giants, because they become that powerful on Wall Street because they, are pretty cutthroat, and because that's how you rise to the top of that particular sphere. So the first time I really wrote meaningfully about Larry Fink was probably a few years ago. In relations to the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, where Larry Fink is a principal. It's like a UN sponsored organization that was co-founded by Mark Carney, former head of the Bank of England and later Bank of Canada, former Goldman Sachs. And also Mike Bloomberg is a big figure there, the former mayor of New York and a well-known billionaire who, started off at Salomon Brothers. So these are essentially bankers, developing what amounts to a major component of UN-sponsored policy directly related to their climate change policies. And basically what GFANZ proposes is creating a new financial governance system, seizing what they call the new Bretton Woods moment. Basically, recreating the global financial system and also reimagining the multilateral development banks, like the World Bank, the IMF, et cetera, which came out of actual Bretton Woods, right? So they want to move all of that into a new paradigm. Larry Fink's been particularly vocal about that. And what GFANZ proposes specifically is merging the members of GFANZ with the multilateral development banks as a way to basically use the same debt model that the MDBs have been criticized for using, but instead of using it to further U.S. empire or the dollar and things of that nature. It's instead the proposal is to use it to create better enabling environments in countries for the green investments of these large financial institutions and asset managers.
It's pretty much the same deal as MDB, just with Wall Street running things behind the scenes. They're dressing it up to look different, but it's really just the same old game with a new face.
So it's basically like perpetuating the same model of the MDBs, but having basically Wall Street run it under the guise that it's a planetary necessity. And that we can't get to net zero without this, which frankly, if you look into the explanations for that, there's no way that's the case. But that's, how I first started writing about Larry Fink was because of his involvement in this relatively open plan to create a new financial system, which among other things doesn't just rest on the MDBs, but also on the development of global carbon markets, which comes up in this particular piece in a pretty meaningful way.
When you look at this, Whitney, do you consider this as BlackRock using their power to rent seek off government policy? Or do you think these people are just purely evil thieves? Or is it both?
Well, Larry Fink is someone who's obviously a member of the elite, and he's also a person who throughout his entire career has been pretty obsessed with risk management. So I think, whatever this new financial system is, it's that he is, part of this group that's proposing this, ultimately is about trying to enable BlackRock to continue its massive expansion to own, essentially everything with, as little risk to them as possible, which obviously a lot of the stuff that Fink is pushing for is part of this broader a system that the world's being pushed into under the guise of sustainable development that includes things like digital IDs and carbon markets and all of that, setting something up where it's will be very difficult to challenge BlackRock's financial prominence and dominance, really, and anything that Fink and others would view as a risk to, their current trajectory, I guess. They don't really have to worry about people or movements like that as they enter into and sort of impose upon us these new systems, which includes, some of these forms of digital control, like the CBDC and their private sector equivalents, for example, programmable surveillable money, and, tied into the digital ID thing.
All of this is supposed to connect with global carbon markets and multilateral development banks. It's all about integrating these systems to drive the same goals and policies on a larger scale.
All of this, as is noted in the article, is meant to interface with, global carbon markets and the multilateral development banks that Fink has been targeting in particular through GFANZ and also, BlackRock itself has been pretty focused on them. They're seeking to, the World Bank is developing climate wallet functionality and a lot of this other infrastructure on which global carbon markets would rely, and are also attempting to become the main data storage for the digital ID system as well. So a lot of big moves are being made through these institutions for part of this new global financial governance system, as GFANZ calls it. I would say, just look at how Larry Fink has been behaving over the past 2-ish years. He was known as a big ESG guy, right? And then he openly abandoned the ESG terminology and straight up said that climate finance, green finance, all of that stuff he's involved in is about profits, not about wokeness or saving the planet or whatever. And since then has also 180'd his stance on Bitcoin and has essentially changed a lot of his talking points, which I think is very notable because, Larry Fink, among other things, is on the board of trustees of the World Economic Forum. And I think the World Economic Forum is misunderstood by a lot of people, and people use certain terms to refer to what they are and what they do. But ultimately what that group is about advancing the public-private partnership model. And of course, there's two sides to that, much like there is in the prevailing left-right paradigm of most countries' politics. And, for a long time, they've leaned sort of on the public side and used talking points that are meant to appeal to the political left. And have gotten a lot of pushback as a result. And so if you notice, people like Fink, but other people as well, have moved their rhetoric away from those seeking to appeal to the political left in the public side of the public-private partnership, leaning into the private aspect of the public-private partnership and having more right-leaning talking points. But ultimately, all are trying to lead you to the same exact system of digital ID, programmable surveillable money, and global carbon markets.
The carbon market is deeply intertwined with the climate change situation. It's all part of the broader strategy to address climate issues.
And I think, the carbon market in particular, it's sort of hard to extricate that from the climate change, situation. But I think it looks like, people like Fink and some of the people in that particular space are going to attempt to market it as something that can make people very wealthy or allow them to get quick access to capital by tokenizing their land holdings and like fractionalizing their private property, using different things that haven't been able to be financialized before, and then bringing that on chain and using that as collateral, receiving loans that way and all of that. There's a lot of ambitious plans in that particular space. And aside from that, there's been this push led by the Rockefeller Foundation and some other groups through this whole push for natural asset corporations, where they basically openly talk about the idea to expand the amount of assets in the existing financial system by like 5 or 6 fold by incorporating what they refer to as natural assets. So this is sort of like the financializing of the natural world and turning, allowing people to sell ecosystem services and all of that. And, this is part of the broader effort to usher in a global carbon market.
Who's in power then? Who's in power, and why would they want to spark civil war?
Okay, professional are in power, and professional are in power who want to stay in power forever. And they know that they can only keep their, they're serial financial. You can only loot a population so much until they realize there's nothing left, and they're going to start asking questions. Where's my money? What happened to all the Social Security money? If you look at the work of Mark Skidmore and Catherine Austin Fitts, $21 trillion of taxpayer money just disappeared. And now there's an accounting practice in the government. Forget how many years it's been in existence. It's called FASAB 56 or FASAB 56, depending on how you want to say it. And it basically legalizes the government's ability to cook the books and present budgets and expenditure lists that are inaccurate to the public and have a private set of books.
It lets every government agency keep 2 sets of books, so it's nearly impossible for anyone to know exactly what they're spending money on.
So it allows every agency in the government to have 2 sets of books, one for them and one for you. So no one really knows what they're spending the money on and where it's going. And there's been no accountability for that. So how long can they get away with this, right? If you look at things like all the financial crises of the last several years, and COVID can be included among this, it's a massive wealth transfer every time. Yeah, the middle class gets smaller and smaller. We are moving to a neo-feudal model, and that's where this is all going. So eventually people are going to realize, I don't have money anymore. What's happened? Right. And are going to ask questions and are going to ask for accountability, or at least a bigger piece of the pie. And these people don't want that. The central bank is also like, the Federal Reserve in New York, for example. How deeply tied is that to Wall Street? I mean, it's sometimes hard to separate, these more criminal banks from the central bank at the end of the day. And also, who created the Fed, originally, right? The Warburg family. I talk about them in volume 1. So
who are the financial, like, do you name them in your books and talk about this?
The book is full of names, and I don't claim to say these are the people. I'm saying these are people we can look at who have ties to intelligence, ties to organized, and engage in the same pattern of provable financial or other forms of over a period of decades. It's a very detailed book. I'm basically stacking detail on top of detail on top of detail to show how these people operate and in how they've never been held accountable, and how basically the people that were in those networks when their predecessors are too old to keep doing this, it goes to the next ones. The baton is passed, and it's the same grift over and over and over again. And it's all about money laundering. I mean, these guys do all of that stuff.
Do you believe that that's possible?
Americans are psychologically conditioned for top-down control, which means they're accustomed to accepting authority and following directives from higher-ups without much questioning.
Yeah, but I think it's going to be, like I said earlier, Americans are psychologically conditioned for top-down control. They want a political savior at the top telling them what to do and fixing all of our problems. What has to happen is that we have to decentralize, right? And at the local level, we have to start building parallel structures to the stuff going on. I mean, I'm sure you guys, you talk about this, CBDCs. Once that comes out, I mean, it's like game on. Like you join that system, you are signing away, your freedom for good, pretty much. So something has to happen before then, or people have to prepare before then and have some sort of parallel structure in place. There's manufactured energy and food crises on the horizon in the US and a lot of the world. There have to be parallel structures in place for you to feed your family and have energy for your family. And Americans have to get started that right away. Obviously, the Biden administration is not going to solve your problems. And even if you manage to, elect Trump 2 years from now, I doubt it will solve anyone's problems either, so it's up to us. We have to, stop waiting for some white knight at the ballot box and take accountability and responsibility for our own lives and make resilient communities. And that's the way to win.
So who's the top? Like, who's the most powerful man in the world, really?
Okay, I don't really know who's the most powerful person on the top. And I don't claim to know that, but I think if you go through the book, I tried to basically do like what can be documented about these people and these over time, and you notice the same names pop up over and over again. Yeah. It's very disturbing, right? I don't even think people like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos are at the top, but they probably know who is.
People really need to start paying closer attention to what's going on in the world right now, with everything that's happening that might affect us.
But I mean, people have to start like looking at the world really seriously right now. And so basically what this book is like a well-documented search for the answers there and what can be documented about organized intelligence. And I think it has a lot of, it should be of great interest to people, particularly interested in the financial aspect of what's going on today, because it documents a lot of the financial crimes and how we got here in a big way. And Epstein was a big part of that. So were things like BCCI, the savings and loan crisis of the 80s. And a lot of these economic crises have just been wealth transfer after wealth transfer. Who keeps getting the money? Who keeps getting richer and richer? I mean, that's who's at the top at the end of the day. So, Endeavor is sort of, I would see them as an outgrowth of some of these earlier entities that sort of did similar things. So in our last article, Debt from Above, we talked about the Club of Rome because there were connections of the Green Plus program we were looking at there to the Club of Rome. And the Club of Rome really started through this group called ADELA, which is an acronym, and it was backed by like the Rockefeller family and a lot of these titans of industry, mainly in Western Europe and North America. And their focus was to basically develop the corporate and economic landscapes of Latin America. And so essentially what they would do is they would choose, the companies that they wanted to be successful, and they would, just give them an insane amount of capital based on the context of the country they're in. So there's no really like other competitors that can match that level of capital that's being injected into these specifically chosen companies. And so those companies rise to the top of the heap, and then those people become like local oligarchs essentially, but they owe their newfound power and influence to the people that finance them. And so if, let's say, those people that, from the West, the Rockefeller family, for example, want a particular policy implemented in Latin America, or want, a favor, are those people going to say no? I think it's rather unlikely, right? And so the power, powerful networks, in the West were doing that in Latin America a long time ago.
The fact that people like Adela are heavily involved in advocating for the deindustrialization and depopulation of Latin America.
And what's disturbing is that, those same people at Adela, like the Rockefellers and the people that went on to fund the Club of Rome, have been big promoters, for example, of deindustrializing and depopulating Latin America. By creating instability and creating all sorts of, other issues or policies, having them implemented across the continent. And it was actually a national security memorandum authored by Kissinger that essentially said the same thing and framed it as as a national security threat. So, we have to consider that this kind of stuff, Adela had lots of positive PR at the time, and in Time magazine, for example, and other outlets talking about how they were doing great things for Latin American businesses. And so, when you look at a group like Endeavor, I'm sure it is framed as positive throughout South America. But the problem is that the people that developed Endeavor, including Rottenberg and Kellner, they have ties that are, as we document in the piece, are of concern, and the people that essentially supercharged Endeavor by giving them millions upon millions of dollars to become what they are now are definitely very disturbing figures, mainly Pierre Omidyar of eBay and the Bronfman family, who, have all sorts of ties to, some of it we've already gone over, but there's definitely a lot more to be said about both of them. And if you look at a lot of, philanthropies in general, you will see that a lot of these very controversial oligarchs, are very interested in funding young global leaders. I say that because, of course, the WEF, World Economic Forum Young Global Leader Program, sort of became infamous in the past few years because of, WEF, the outgoing chairman of the WEF, Klaus Schwab, saying on video that, the Young Global Leader Program is so great because, we penetrate the cabinets. And, a lot of people pointed to that as being why, during, all these young global leaders were in all these different cabinets throughout the world. And that was why, one of the reasons perhaps why so many countries adopted the same exact stance and policies as it related to. And Endeavor is a similar network. A lot of the people involved in creating it, also young WEF, young global leaders.
These people aren't just found in the public sector. They're also deeply entrenched in the private sector, which means their impact on policies and practices is far-reaching.
And, these people aren't just in the public sector, they're also in the private sector. And Endeavor focuses expressly on the private sector in emerging markets, which, as we've discussed, earlier, there's a major interest to have Latin America completely dependent on, the United States and have it be, financially yoked to the United States and have its, resources are, belong to the United States. I mean, there's people, in power who have essentially said that, maybe a little more indirectly, in the past. I'm pretty sure John Bolton, for example, who was Trump's national security advisor and is a very, very much disliked neocon, has, quotes to that effect about Latin America's ours, basically. And so, there's efforts to sort of make that happen. And I would argue that Endeavor is a way to sort of develop these corporate landscapes in a way similar to Adela, and to make it look decentralized in name only. But they share a lot of the same funding and they share a lot of the same connections. And when those powerful people at the top come to call to those entrepreneurs, they can be influenced. And I would argue, again, that perhaps the most important point here is that the main Endeavor-backed companies, a lot of them are based around Endeavor Argentina specifically, are becoming the dominant platforms for e-commerce and fintech and crypto use, and also Bitcoin use, obviously, on the continent, especially at a time when this, what I would argue is an engineered economic crisis in places like Argentina, decades in the making, are forcing people onto these platforms, and they're. You had someone like Milei elected expressly because he's like, I'm going to dollarize, and maybe he's not now. But stablecoins are a way to sort of get that. And these are, the dominant force here as it relates to, crypto, payment rails. So much of it is based around Mercado Libre, which is like the e-commerce giant of the entire continent, and was, one of the first Endeavor-backed companies in 1999. And you have Marcos Galperin being a big a big figure, but his co-founder at Mercado Libre created Kazakh Ventures, which is he'd made with another Endeavor entrepreneur, and they've gone to fund thousands of startups. And all of these companies, a lot of time, I mean, it's just business sense. You're beholden to your funding a lot of the time because you don't want to lose that funding.
There are many ways to influence private sector policy, and these influences can significantly impact how businesses operate and make decisions.
And so they have influence with you. They have clout. And so there's a lot of different ways to influence private sector policy. And if you're looking to move, from the public to the private side of the public-private partnership, you need to have a lockdown on the private sector the same way you have it on the public sector. If you want to have, the control and power that you're seeking, you can't just ignore one whole half of that partnership, right? And so I think this is a way to create a constellation of companies. And I'm not saying all Endeavor entrepreneurs are bad or like bad people. The point is the people at the top and the people like on the board, people like Reid Hoffman, for example, are not good, and they can exert influence on Endeavor entrepreneurs very, very easily, and on the people that own the most important critical companies for fintech in Latin America. And while a lot of these same actors, as we discussed earlier, are basically seeking to push Latin America into covert dollarization with the intent of eliminating really their financial sovereignty in a way that could have major implications for the continent. And, if Bitcoin is about like promoting freedom and banking the unbanked, like, is this, I think this is something that should be discussed. I think it's important to keep in mind that these people have been very serious and played very dirty and created insane instability just to keep the dollar the global reserve currency, because it gives a lot of advantages just to the US. And I fully feel that they intend to keep those advantages, even if it means a different system.
When it comes to the internet or the financial system, they're going to make enemy privacy a major concern.
And when it comes for the internet or the financial system, they're going to make the enemy privacy. They're going to make the enemy privacy 100%. And the solution is going to be digital IDs and programmable surveillable money. It doesn't have to be CBDCs, by the way. I mean, CBDCs, I think most people know, are going to be that, but it doesn't. It's not just CBDCs. There is a goal. There is a push from the banks themselves, some of the most powerful banks in the world, to have, at least in some countries, a different system that's not a CBDC, because with a CBDC, they can't do fractional reserve banking. And so that's what deposit tokens are all about. Tokenizing deposits, and you can make those programmable and you can surveil them. And it's really just like a CBDC, but they won't call it that. But then the bank controls all the reserves, and maybe they'll bank some of their reserves at the Fed or whatever, but they can still do fractional reserve banking and credit creation and all of this stuff, and not actually have to keep a one-to-one peg of reserves like CBDCs or like a fiat peg stablecoin. And so there's a push for that too at an international level. It's not just in the U.S., but it's definitely happening in the U.S. And I would argue that's one of the reasons that you have the Federal Reserve, which is again owned by Wall Street banks in the U.S., being like, we're not going to do a direct issued CBDC, and freedom advocates in the U.S. are like, yeah, the Fed's on our side because of that. No, it's not. The Fed is 100% always on the side of Wall Street banks, and Wall Street banks only don't want a CBDC because they don't want to give the Federal Reserve their power. They want to keep their power, and they want to keep doing fractional reserve banking. I don't know. I think there's a lot of people in Congress that get into Congress campaigning on certain issues, and then once they're there long enough, they backtrack completely. There's a lot of examples of that historically and currently in the U.S. for sure. So, I mean, Elizabeth Warren is garbage. The DNC got all this money, from Sam Bankman-Fried? How anti-crypto are they really? I think it's they're willing to play ball and set up regulations and be the kingmakers in the crypto industry. I think there's a lot of, I think that's going to happen. And then they're going to try and nix everything that doesn't serve them. And again, financial privacy being the main thing that doesn't serve them. But they also want to give unprecedented control to the DOJ, to go and contact any crypto exchange or even Tether, right? And be like, freeze these wallets. There's all sorts of things that are happening in Bitcoin right now that could be under that umbrella. But when you start to have people like BlackRock being like, you know what, we actually like Bitcoin now, that's a sign to pay attention. You know what I mean?
Bitcoin is hope.
So I think people need to, in the Bitcoin space, need to be very aware that there is a fight being had right now about the future of Bitcoin.